So in honor of Mother's Day, I thought I would share with you some of my very favorite momisms. But I know I heard them all when I was growing up. The first is, money does not grow on trees, young man. This is one of my favorites. If Jimmy jumped off a cliff, would you do it too? How many of you have ever said that? Close that door. You weren't born in a barn. Don't put that in your mouth. You don't know where it's been. Because I'm your mother, that's why. See how my southern accent starts coming out? Yeah, Clay, do you have a favorite one?
Yeah. I'm mad.
I'm mad. All right. I'll help you pack your bags. I remember that one too. Yeah.
You cut your feet off with that lawnmower. Don't come running to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that one too. Yeah, I remember that one too. Yep. Someday your face is going to stick like that. Yes, I am too your boss. Remember that one? I've got eyes in the back of my head, that's how. I don't know where your shoes are. I don't remember where I left them the last time I wore them. You get the idea. But Jay's mom had a great saying. He said she always said it to them as they were leaving to go anywhere, go to school or go out the door. And she would always say, remember who you are. Now, I'm sure there are many layers to that. Don't embarrass me when you go out in public. Remember you're my child and you are a representative of our family, But remember who you are, I think is a great advice, not only for children, but for all of us, to really remember who we truly are. And some of us are studying a book by Robert Brummett called Birthing a Greater Reality. It's a guide to conscious evolution. And in that book, he talks a great deal about reclaiming our wholeness, remembering who we truly are in all of our wholeness. He talks about the shadow and how to do shadow work and different things about that. How to reclaim those aspects of ourselves that we have disowned or put in behind us in some way because, for whatever reason, they weren't acceptable or they weren't supported by our families or by our culture or by society, and so they become the shadow. But today I want to talk a little bit about, because it's Mother's Day, about how we have disowned the divine feminine, that we have somehow separated ourselves from what is known as the divine feminine. And it's not our fault. For many centuries, millennia probably, the divine feminine has been suppressed in our religions, especially our monotheistic religions, right? Which of Christianity is one, where we disown the mother aspect of God, that we have somehow demonized that feminine divine energy. And we see it playing out in the structure of our religions very often. Islam is also one of those monotheistic religions that suppresses the divine energy, the divine feminine, the divine mother. And so because for so long it has been suppressed and demonized in many ways, we've disowned it. We have put it behind us. We have embraced instead many of the aspects that we think of as the divine or masculine. And we see the effects of that in our world today, I think. We see the effects in our culture. We see the effects in really how, in many ways, we treat those of the female gender in our society. Not to the extent that some societies do, I understand, but even that we don't pay women equally to men. And some of the ways that women are not allowed to be in roles, especially in the church or even in our culture. And so it's important, I think, for us to own that, to acknowledge that, and to really begin to see what that's about for us, that there is a divine aspect that is a part of all of us. And what we're witnessing today, I think, in the way that we are separated from that, it's played out in the way that we disrespect our earth and our environment and all of the things that we associate with the mother, the divine mother. You know, we pollute the earth, we pollute our air, we destroy habitats for our animals, and we sacrifice our children in war. And we allow genocide. In all of the ways, because we're not connected. And I think that in order for us to restore harmony and balance, we have to begin to really embrace that aspect of us as part of our wholeness. Because until we embrace our wholeness within ourselves, we're not going to heal. And until we embrace it within ourselves, we're not going to embrace it in our societies. And we're not going to continue to live that and to heal what the ills are. And I'm not discounting the masculine. I think it's important, but we have to have that flow, the balance. We have to know both. Have to come into that divine marriage of the masculine and feminine energies so that we can express that in the world. And Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, in one of his articles for Unity magazine back in the 1930s, now I have to find it again, but he talked about Jesus as our way shower. And he said, Jesus enthroned woman. Jesus recognized her equality with man and has since that time, or the divine feminine, and since that time has been gradually escaping the age-old slavery for the mind. He's talking about the soul, the spirit, the love that is embodied in that divine feminine which shows up in our world. Jesus would have it's interesting to what he says. Jesus would have utterly failed in the resurrection of his body after the crucifixion if he had not developed the restorative power of divine love. So no man can hope to escape death until he frees the imprisoned love of his soul. Fear, anger, anxiety, and hate paralyze the hearts of men. Like reckless automobile drivers, men crush their hearts and wreck their bodies, and no longer restrains them. There is a law and a remedy for this insane destruction of life, and that is divine love. But men are slow to recognize the transforming power of love. Even Jesus was at last to admit the feminine had any part in his demonstration. This is interesting. When his mother called his attention to the lack of wine, which metaphysically is the vitality of life, he replied, "Woman, what have I to do with thee?" But in his life, in his interactions with the women that showed up in his life, he began to embrace that divine feminine aspect. You see, we talk a lot about the male disciples. We talk a lot in unity about them representing the 12 powers and Jesus calling them to Him, and that those powers represent our Christ nature, and how important it is that we embrace those aspects of the divine. And yes, it is important that we embrace those aspects of the divine, but when we only embrace the aspects of the divine that are associated with the masculine, then we are left wanting. We are left unwhole. And we need to give equal weight and measure to the women that show up in these stories. What do they represent for us? Jesus is our way shower in Christianity, Christology, whatever you want to call it, for us. Jesus is the example of a human being, just like you and I are human beings, who go through a process of integration, integrating those divine aspects. And all too often in Christianity, and I would say even in unity, more progressive Christianity, if you will, we deny sometimes the power of the female, the power of that feminine energy, and the aspects that Jesus embraced. Had to experience His own wholeness and His own healing and His own power. As Charles Fillmore said, He would have utterly failed in the resurrection had He not embraced that divine feminine, the love energy. And so, as I considered that this week, I was reminded of who were some of those women and what do they represent for Jesus. And of course, His mother, Mary, really represented. Do you remember how she was when she found out she was going to have Jesus? And she was like, "Be it done unto me. I am the servant. I am here to give. I am here to allow that life to have its life, to grow within me, and to be that one that births that into the world. Let me be the one who is open to that, who is the vessel for that." The love that showed up in Mary. And we talk a great deal about John representing love as one of the 12 powers, the disciple John. Well, when we look at John's life, actually, John was really all about the mental idea of love. If you remember some of the stories about John, he said, when he was talking to Jesus about the unbelievers, he wanted God to rain down fire on them. He wanted to destroy the unbelievers. That's not my idea of divine love. It may be that idea of more of a tribal understanding of love, right? He loved Jesus, but even in one story in the Bible, John's all about, well, I want to be on your right hand. I want to be your right-hand man. I want to be raised up. I want to be known as one of the leaders. So it was really more about a mental, and I'm not, again, please don't hear me say that that's a bad thing. I think it's important to have the understanding of these divine ideas, but until we get it into our hearts, until we awaken what we think of as the divine feminine within us and allow that to be embodied in us as Mary exampled, then we are not whole. We're missing half of the picture. And we can't ourselves truly arise in our Christed consciousness. I love one of my favorite stories about Jesus is his encounter with the woman who had been hemorrhaging for 12 years. And she believed that if she touched the hem of his garment, she would be healed. And so when she knew he was coming to town, she snuck out of the tent that she was in because of her problem, her issue, and she went to where Jesus was, and she reached out, and she touched the hem of his garment, and she was healed. Simply by just being in that energy field. And what did Jesus say to her? First, he acknowledged that he knew someone had touched him, but he said, "Your faith has made you whole." Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty amazing faith. The power of faith. And that's just not just an intellectual faith. That's a heart faith. That's a knowing faith. That's a knowing, heartfelt, centered, embodied faith. Again, we talk a lot about Peter being the disciple who represents faith. But look at Peter. When Jesus called him out of the boat onto the water and said, "Come to me," he took a step and then he sunk. And Jesus said, "Oh, ye of little faith." Well, yeah, he had faith, but it was an intellectual faith. And it's important to understand faith, but it's also important to embody faith. And so the woman who touched the hem of his garment was a teacher for Jesus. You know, she was an example. And the other part of the story that is so important for us to get is that when she touched his hem, he didn't just keep on walking. He went back and looked for her. He looked for her. He was seeking out, I think, his own understanding of that level of faith and connecting with it. He didn't just pass it by. He incorporated it into his awareness. That's what that represents to me, is that he didn't just, okay, well, that happened, no big deal, and keep on going. No, he really reached out and found her and talked to her. He incorporated that into his own consciousness. Heartfelt faith. And also the woman, he encountered the Samaritan woman at the well. He said, "Give me a drink," and that whole conversation. Jews didn't talk to Samaritans. Men didn't talk to women. Especially some Jewish men didn't talk to Samaritan women, especially. So why did Jesus have the conversation? Why did Jesus, in our understanding, our metaphysical understanding, as the human being who was embracing and embodying the divine Christ energy, Jesus, from that perspective, had to know that he had to have contact. He had to embrace the feminine energy. And so this woman at the well listened to what he had to say. And I think she understood. She had the understanding that he was a great teacher. He was the Messiah, so to speak. But it's not a mental understanding. It's not, oh, that makes sense to me, or I can reason that out. It's a heartfelt understanding where we know, right? That's the feminine. It's understanding at a mental aspect, yes, but can we embody it? Can we really embody it? And two of my favorite women characters in the Bible that I'm even aware of are Mary and Martha, the sisters of Lazarus, and the ones who, Mary of Bethany, when Jesus goes to their house with his entourage, and he's teaching, and Mary is just sitting at his feet, soaking it all up, soaking it all in, taking the wisdom and his understanding and taking it in. And Martha's over there working away, trying to fix the food, And she goes to Jesus, and says, tell her to help me out, Tell her to help me. And Jesus said, well, she's chosen the greater path. And I don't think that he was really saying that one is better than the other. Because I look at that metaphysically as Mary and Martha are sisters. They're in the same house, which is sort of the same consciousness, the same place in our own consciousness. And so they're working together. And that's what it takes. Our willingness to be devoted to that higher self, the Christ within, the indwelling Christ awareness, the true light, the true self, to be like Mary and to be able to be devoted to that and to do the work that is in service to that. So it has to be that balance for us. Really, one without the other. Faith without works is dead. So we have to have the balance. And then finally today I want to just discuss the Magdalene, Mary, Miriam of Magdala, many different names that she is known by. And the church, the early church, really did demonize Mary Magdalene. They made her into a prostitute and gave her no credit, really denied her power and her closeness and her relationship with Jesus. You know, there are some people who believe that she and Jesus were married. Even a former Methodist minister says that that's probably true. I mean, it makes sense. Jesus was a Jew, and he was 30-something years old, and that was part of their culture. But even if they weren't necessarily married in the physical, when we look at it metaphysically, I tend to believe they were, but even if they weren't, if we look at it metaphysically, it is a representation of that divine marriage of heart and mind, of the masculine and the feminine. That Mary of Magdala really represented that. And I think for me, she represents that intuition, wisdom, that aspect of the divine feminine. When we look at the story of the resurrection, she was the first person to whom Jesus revealed himself. Now, we're talking about in the physical, but when we look at that metaphysically, he revealed himself to her in consciousness. And she was open to receive it. She had the ability to connect with the wisdom, to intuit the truth. Not from trying to make sense of it, because as you and I know, sometimes it absolutely makes no sense to try to reason out what our inspiration is or what our intuition is. And so Mary of Magdala really represents to me that aspect of the divine, the mother, the divine feminine, that we have the opportunity to bring back into our awareness, into our consciousness. That divine love that says, I am open, use me, allow me to be the one through whom this consciousness is birthed into the world, into this dimension. Let me be the one who has that faith of heart faith, to know the truth, and to hold to the truth, and to believe what I know is true, to believe in the power of the Christ that is moving in me, through me, as me. Let me be that one. Let me be the one who understands that from a deeper level. Let me be the one who is devoted to that and serves that in a very meaningful and outer way. Let me be the one who has the intuition that understands, that can connect, that can really know at a gut level, a deep level, the truth that I am embodying, the truth that I'm hearing, the truth that I'm receiving. Let me be that. Let me be the vessel. And it is, I think, that is how we do it. We invite it. We welcome it. We choose to say, I am that. I am love. I am wisdom. I am understanding. I am that devotion and willing and open vessel and channel. And I guarantee you, As you continue to allow that, affirm that, as you align with that, as you radiate with that, everything in the universe will show up to show you and to prove it to you. Because you will be attracting everything you need from that I am presence to know your truth and to be reminded of that truth and to live that truth. But you, in your own consciousness, in your own life, in my life, we have to claim it. And we have to be willing to claim it. And so, I want to just acknowledge, just really go back to that place of that heart-centered Divine Mother, that energy that shows up in us. And it's important for us to honor that. Not to put that aside because we're afraid of it, or because we think that if we exhibit those qualities, those aspects of our divine nature, that we will not be accepted. You know, the church burned women at the stake because they were in touch with their intuition, with their wisdom, with their guidance. They burned them as witches when they were connected to the earth. That's in our collective consciousness. And it's time for us to reclaim that for ourselves, because in doing that, we are the ones that are going to heal the planet. We are the ones that are going to heal the consciousness of humanity. We are the ones that are going to bring forth a new earth. But we can't do it just from here. We can't do it just from an intellectual understanding. We have to be willing to embody it, to claim it, to engage and to welcome and to, through our affirming and aligning that divine marriage of the masculine and feminine, and to really allow ourselves to be that, to know ourselves as that, to welcome it. And to, like Charles Fillmore said, Jesus would have utterly failed in the resurrection. And so as we're talking about resurrection, that transformation, as we used on Easter, the caterpillar to the butterfly, we're now really embracing that. But we can't be truly successful at that until we embrace and embody those qualities of the divine feminine. And so I celebrate that with you today, and I encourage us all to really, in our hearts, to open up, to be the expression and embodiment of our wholeness